You have a nice bouncing chair there, I see.
It's great. Good for the core. Maybe I need to stop eating cheese too, and that's terrible for a Frenchman. So we had like flat modules that we would fold, and then we would strap them to the next module and so on. And so I called the team in London, and I'm like, guys, we did a banana and it doesn't fit. And we all panicked. I think the team was already taking the plane or whatever. Right now I'm talking to you because it's you, right?
Yeah,
like if I were talking to the general public, fitness criteria for your matrix, I remember looking at a tree and being like, whoa. You know what I mean?
Oh, you have a nice bouncing chair there, I see.
Yeah, it's great. Good for the core. Maybe I need to stop eating cheese too, and that's terrible for a Frenchman.
The country started opening up?
No, London is not open yet, but people are still going for walks. I'm going for walks and stuff.
I don't know. I'm not really following the numbers and stuff like that. Not really reading the news that much. My wife is doing that. I don't know if you're following everything, but
a little bit. I think it's kind of always the same thing on the news, right? So it gets a bit depressing, but
yeah.
But I follow obviously what's going on because I've got a business, so we need to know when we can go back to work, when it's okay to. I mean, we do rely a lot on what the government says, but we have people in the office at the moment because we use laser cutting and 3D printing, so there's no way we can do this remotely.
Oh, that's exactly what I wanted to ask. How does the online work?
Well, for anything design related and design development and technical design, like we can definitely work remotely, no problem. Mm-hmm. When it comes to fabrication heavy projects, so projects that rely heavily on us testing things and doing things in a factory or at the fab lab, at the fab pub, then that's very slow because we only have one person there, because we're not facing each other, so we cannot have these live conversations all the time. Yeah. So we need to find a slot where we both don't have any phone calls, and then he needs to kind of, he has reduced hours there. So, I mean, we do our best, but it's definitely slowed down work,
Yeah, I get it. Yeah. And what's happening with this new temple? Did you find a solution for VR?
Well, so it's not quite a temple. It was more, it's a similar size, but it was more a sort of an amphitheater, a place where people could leave art and creative pieces. And so we found a place called Alt Space, and we have a VR. I have an Oculus Quest, and we are experimenting with the Oculus Quest within the VR space, Alt Space, for the virtual Burning Man. Burning Man has not decided like which platform to use just yet, but we are exploring that. I didn't see many other virtual spaces that would be a good match. The good thing with Allspace is that it works with Unity. Mm-hmm. And so that means we can program and package Unity interfaces, as in like the whole model, and optimize for game engines. And then we upload that into the Allspace. And then, so we had our site visit yesterday with the team, as in virtual site visit. And we could fly in the sky and look at the project, and it's just fascinating, isn't it? Like, I've never experienced a project virtually, so in such an immersive way.
But did you use the teleport, or did you actually fly through the model?
So we teleport between worlds, but when you're within the world of, so the Burning Man, the virtual Burning Man is like very low poly, but it's like very big, and could welcome like thousands of people, if not hundreds of thousands. But then we have the teleport translation hubs that take us to a much more developed world where we can go more high res. Okay. And so that's kind of nice. And also it gives the artists opportunities to have their own world in very high res within what would otherwise be very low res. If everyone was in the same universe, so you have these different kind of spaces where we can play. It's really good.
And you didn't have any problem with dizziness or stuff, especially if you tried to fly?
So you're right. It takes time to get used to it. I had to stop after a while. So it's definitely not going to be a week like Burning Man with the virtual goggles. And it's kind of weird to go out of that world and be in your home. Which definitely, when you go to Burning Man, you're fully immersed for a week and more, So it's definitely not the same feeling, and at all, like far from it.
Of course.
But I think it still opens up
Mhm.
other worlds which are still kind of better than always being at home. So I think it's going to push us to appreciate these other worlds, you know.
Let me ask you a little bit about that original temple in Burning Man. How was that? You won a competition, right? Or how was that?
So I've been going to Burning Man for a couple years with my students at the University of Westminster. We were building projects with them, their designs, and so they would apply for the grant. There's something called the Art Grant, and so we had, I don't know, six projects maybe that received grants. And so the first year we went to help them realize it, and then I started applying as well with my own company to do some projects too, and students continued, and so at the end, like the year of the temple was one that won the grant, obviously with my practice, and then we also had 2 or 3 student projects there, so it was a big year that year, 2018. The temple itself, it's a bigger grant that you applied for separately from the art grant, and so that was quite a large grant, like $100,000 from Burning Man. But Burning Man usually helps you with parts of your costs, and then the rest you have to fundraise. So it's a pretty intense.
So how much did it end up costing then?
$600,000.
Really? Wow.
So that was hard because to pay that, we had to do, events, crowdfunding campaigns. We had to reach out to high donors and do dinners, like high donor dinners. We had to, it was just there was a whole team dedicated to fundraising. There was a team dedicated to, obviously the prototyping, the prefabrication, a team for metal work, a team for benches, we had 140 people divided into teams, and the teams were all, it was already remote working. We were all on Slack, and everyone had a channel, and so it was a lot of management and like dealing with, and everyone was around the world, so to kind of, and also different time zones. So it was hard.
But the project looks amazing, first of all. Second of all, it looks statically very complex. Like, how did you solve that? Like, who did the static analysis? Did you have trouble with that?
So since I started working, even like when I first did my practice, I was lucky to come across a team of engineers, which they first worked at Ramble, and they were called the kind of advanced, or one of those computational groups. At the time we weren't, there was less grasshoppering and stuff, but I was teaching grasshopper, and I've always used it from day one. But and so I met them, and it was Stephen Melville, James Solly, and etc. And then we worked on the first Burning Man student project, which was a sort of giant shipwreck shape and a big fractal made of scaffolding poles. And then at the same time, they asked me to work on a project for Virgin Galactic. It was a sort of hotel for the astronauts before they go to space. And so that was really the basis of Galaxia, because that weekend we developed a few versions for Virgin Galactic, and this one was done using recursion, like Hoop Snake. And it was just like kind of, just like kind of loops. And so we started our working relationship with those engineers very, very early on, and it continued. Then they set up format engineers. And since then, we've been sharing a grasshopper. They use Karamba. So on Galaxia, we had the lines set up from grasshopper, and then they did the Karamba analysis. Then they would send us back the newtons, the kilonewtons per members. And then based on these kilonewtons, we try and maximize tension. So we would try and get, I think it's the positive values were tension, negative were compression. So I think, right? Yeah. And so we try and direct all the truss members so that they would be, most of them, in tension, number one.
Yeah.
And number two, the amount of bolts and screws would depend on the amount of newtons. So we would have to set our metal plates joints so that they would basically vary in size depending on the newtons. That was very interesting. They gave us the formula for that, and then we tried to grasshopperize their formulas and their principles.
Yeah, well, amazing that it worked. I mean, it stood there for some time. It didn't have to stand for a very long time. How long? A week?
Yeah, so it only stood for a week. And honestly, it was the scariest moment because, those volunteers that I'm mentioning, the 140 people, they're not carpenters, or they're not professional contractors. They're you and me, they're lawyers, they're people that come because they want to build something. And so, for example, we use ratchet straps to connect the nodes because otherwise it would be really complex bolts, nodes, welding, and there was just no way to do that. So we just did ratchet straps, and it actually worked fine. I mean, people were shocked because people are used to buildings that are really kind of clean and detailed, and architects love a good detail. But here is a team of volunteers just, building a very complex form. But I still think it's okay, because if you think of your forms to be volunteer friendly, then we can think of ways to build and assemble in a kind of sequence that people can learn. So we had flat modules that we would fold, and then we would strap them to the next module, and so on. And so we had redundancies, and so that's why the Caramba model was very complex, because you had two members side by side, and so it drove our engineers nuts. I'm amazed we still work together. I was on the phone with them just now. It just made us so close. So we realized that the boundary between design and engineering is just, it's no longer something that's so linear, they are as creative as us. They are as involved, as early as us, architects. And that's really, I think it's really important nowadays with parametric design.
That's actually very central to my work. I mean, a lot of projects that I work on, it's always the question, how can you generate a model and prepare it for static analysis at the same time? And because the geometrical model and statical model are usually very, very different. Because a statical model is always a sort of abstraction. An abstraction that usually doesn't have much to do with reality. Sometimes, for example, I have this example on my YouTube channel and also on my website. We did those Apple Store stairs, those glass spiral stairs.
Yeah.
So I'm cooperating with an engineering office that does static analysis for them. So
nice.
So I did a model, a geometrical model, parametric, that is at the same time a statical one. And then when you see, for example, a simple disk on disk, like in geometry, those are two little cylinders.
Yeah.
But in a statical model, it's completely different. There's like some kind of spiders with different members.
Yeah.
So it's a completely different abstraction than the geometrical one. So I had to basically build up these two parametric models in parallel at once.
Side by side.
And
that's great.
This was 2013-14, and since then I'm heavily concentrating in practice on whenever I have to do something geometrically, parametrically, I always think about these different directions. How will we then automatically generate the statical model, and how will we automatically generate the fabrication data? For your fabrication, you directly exported from Rhino, right? With the fabrication.
No. For fabrication, it was so we had these triangles that would be built by 2x4 timber or 4x4, and depending on the forces, and sometimes doubled up, so two 2x4s next to each other. And we would unfold it, so we would literally just kind of unroll the modules side by side, and so create a matrix of components that people could. And then each one we generated drawings of each one of these opened module in a parametric way. So when you bake the grasshopper, you directly have them in the layouts of Rhino, which is really convenient. And then obviously we had to do paper models to check. There was this very big moment where I'm in Reno, so I'm close to we already fabricated all the triangles. And with a colleague of mine, we build a paper model, we print, and and then we assemble what we call the banana, the big petal, because there's 20 of these bananas, and then and it doesn't fit. And I'm like, shit. So I called the team in London. And I'm like, guys, we did a banana and it doesn't fit. And we all panicked. I think the team was already taking the plane or whatever. And then we just realized that we just did shrink to fit on the on when we printed.
Yeah.
And so it was right. But oh my God, this moment where you realize, you know,
that's extremely scary, you know, in parametrics. I mean, people really don't realize that. But the scariest thing when you automate everything is that a simple mistake, one number, can result in the whole project being wrong. I worked last 3 years on this Kuwait airport from Foster, you know, and I had a lot of stress there exactly because of that problem, because I used Rhino to generate like the reinforcement for concrete panels for the entire airport. It's one of the biggest airports in the world. And you understand, like, simple number, you change it and the whole reinforcement for the entire airport, which is billions and billions of dollars, is wrong. Just because you changed one simple number. So that's very scary in parametrics.
It's crazy. And, you know, I think the answer to that is a collaboration. Like when you start giving your file to someone else, that's when they realize there's a problem. So we always do this, like someone will do something, then someone else opens the Grasshopper, then someone else opens the Grasshopper. And so by having several people work on one Grasshopper, you force this check, right? But it's not just a check, as in I open it, I check. It's like I have to use it. So I have to like generate more drawings, or I have to adapt or work on another part. And so I realized that if we share the Grasshoppers, we can optimize them together. And so actually collaboration is a great way to prevent mistakes and errors. More brains onto one thing. So sharing is
that's definitely one way. Another way is that literally 50% of the code that I wrote was error check, you know. You just additional functions that go through the model and you think of everything possible, but of course you cannot think of everything. That's the problem. But I wanted to ask you about the Burning Man. For me, that's a very interesting concept, because I mean, most architects, when they study, they go with this idea that they want to create something that lasts, that wants to surpass them, you know. And this, you have more like this mandala, you know, Buddhist approach, like you create it and then you burn it. So I wanted to ask, what's the feeling like? Is it like liberating when you burn it, or is it sad, or?
It's a good question. It's not like I ended up at Burning Man because I believed in permanence, or it's, you know, Burning Man was a thing. First, I didn't know, I'd never been to any places like this, like what one would see as a festival. Or I was into computation. I was giving classes every week on Grasshopper, and I was very passionate about environmental aspects, and, you know, Freyotto, Gaudi, and all these people that form find and use mathematics. But I didn't have this sort of other dimension, which is the sort of fun and the fabrication to a level of. And I met a colleague, Toby Burgess, with who we decided to teach together a unit. And then he comes from the boat making, you know, industry kind of thing. Like he was making boats. He had a complete different background in a way. And his girlfriend just came back from Burning Man. So he's like, oh, you know, there's this place in the US that has this kind of really crazy side, but also this really interesting aspect that links what we like, you know, Buckminster Fuller, environmental concepts of leaving no trace, of self-reliance, and it links this with the idea of creating fun, interactive stuff. And at the time, you know, parametric design, Ahim Menges, like all these kind of really interesting concepts of generative components, all these things, was often fairly scientific and not really, I mean, I'm tempting to say the word fun, but like Burning Man brought such a fun dimension to parametric design. And it also, so people were very engaged, and the students were just like equally excited by learning Grasshopper as they were as going to Burning Man and partying. And so I started going there, and I'm like, oh, that's going to be kind of weird. Like, it's not really my place. Like, I don't know. And so, plus it's hot, and like you're in a tent and you're full of dirt. And You don't really shower, and I'll pass you the details, but so we built that first project, and then we realized we got it completely wrong, that we needed to weld some plates, and so I'm in there with students in dust storms, forgetting half of the laser cutting stuff. I can't open my computer because it's the dust. And so I was so completely forced to let go of the perfection of the digital world. I was forced to let go of laser cutting perfect things. I learned what tolerance was. I learned what, welding on site was. I learned letting go of perfect details and classroom stuff, and just appreciate that, the real world talks to you in a very different way than the computer, right? And so that was my first lesson. And then the second lesson was when you arrive in a place that is pure, like pure nature, no human intervention, and then you build something, a big city, and then you undo it. Obviously you burn stuff, but you also completely take care of your waste, take care of your water, take care of it, and know your energy level, know your waste, and then leave and have nothing left, and give it back to nature. And as you say, it's very cyclical, it's very Buddhist, and that aspect then started creeping in the other aspect of what I now consider as letting go of permanence and understanding the circular economy in a very deep way. And then, I met people like Wasp who 3D print with earth and want to put it back to earth. And they are Buddhists. They are convinced Buddhists that talk about Shambhala, the ideal city that disappears, And it's actually a concept that's actually, I think, very important now and very sustainable, and a full rewind of our notions of ego and permanence, and this idea that the great architect is one that builds something that lasts forever, and the ruins and and so it's an interesting point you made.
So the festival kind of fits to your personality then. You aside from the architecture part, let's say.
Yeah, so I went there being very critical, and then slowly I think these principles of the idea that we're all artists, that we can all be creative, that we all have a responsibility with our waste, our materials, that we need to think with time in mind, with costs in mind, that we need to be entrepreneurial, that we need to raise funds for our project, that we're not such victims of clients or contractors, or we have the power to make changes. And I think that's what I learned at Burning Man, for sure.
And then this now new project is not a temple, so someone else was designing a temple for this year, or how?
Yeah, it's a nice design. She's called Sylvia Adrian, and Renzo, not piano, but another one. And they built a really beautiful star-shaped pavilion. And the temple is always designed by someone else. There's only one architect that got to build many temples, called David Best. And so they tend to just kind of alternate, and the designs are always really interesting, because it's obviously a temple, so it's secular, but it's still like spiritual. Yeah. And the spaces that they create have to reflect that. So they come they're very meaningful projects, and the community, it resonates with a massive community of people that are pretty open-minded. So to actually study the history of Burning Man temples is a really interesting exercise in contemporary architecture. Mm-hmm. You'll find, when I first went in 2013, the temple was fully CNC cut, and there was no metal connections. It was by Greg Fleischman, and he took that concept and applied it for refugee camps and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Fascinating. But yeah, people don't necessarily are aware that Burning Man has these architectural aspects, because they don't see it as a permanent thing. So they don't think permanence equals architecture. They think it's just kind of event space.
Yeah. Do you still hear me? Because I changed the microphone.
I did. There was just one echo, but
okay.
You're going to edit this, right? It's not fully.
Of course.
The live stuff is hard,
Yeah. What's hard?
Live YouTubing. Like Dizine did a live thing. This channel did a live thing, and it was hard because you're live, so there's no.
When did you do a live thing?
I did one with Dizine 2 days ago, and I did one with a Turkish channel last week. Yeah.
I'll ask you something more about Burning Man later, but I wanna use the time to talk about different subjects that are resonating maybe with both of us. So one subject that I wanted to talk to you with, because I find it interesting, is that we both have a relatively small office, so we both work on our own. So you and me, at some point, we had to decide so not to go find a job. It's some big office where we would maybe have some big lever and work on some big projects, but to try to do something on our own. And I mean, when I was deciding to do that, like after I was finishing my PhD, when I was, I don't know, 27, 28, and I was thinking, I was kind of researching like all the famous architectural offices in the world. You know, I would go to Wikipedia and then research Fuxas and UN Studio and all this, and then wonder how did they start. And the story was kind of always the same. It's like after the college, 1-2 years they worked, and then they started doing that on their own, and then they struggled 5 to 10 years until the first big project came and they succeeded. And I said, okay, if I want to do anything big, I have to start on my own as early as possible. So that was my logic. Of course, that's not 100%. There are many that started later. But I wonder what was always your thoughts on that subject, on working for someone or for yourself? How did you start?
It's a good question, and it's very hard to reply because when I graduated was the crisis, 2008, not so dissimilar to now, and so I struggled to find a job in one of those big practices. Obviously, you know, I reached out to the big names and stuff, but no one was hiring, and I ended up in a really interesting small office called Procter & Matthews, and they just won a zoo project, like a kind of giant biodome in which with all kinds of ecosystem, and I love that concept. And so I went there and worked for 2 years on that, and it was amazing. And honestly, I don't think we ever work for someone. We always work for ourselves. Like, you know, even then, I was working because I was learning, because I was enjoying it. I didn't see it as this is for someone else. I think that notion was, you know, I didn't feel it this way. So it's not like I suddenly said I need my own thing, or that I was obsessed with having my own thing. Like I would have perfectly continued in an office that fulfilled what I thought was great, and I suggested some things, and they said no, and I, you know, at some point I'm like, well, you know, I kind of want to do that. I wanted to do 3D printing. I wanted to have a fab lab. I knew that. I was excited by the potential of parametric design to enable other people to customize projects. So I was very excited at the idea of, how do you call it, you know, democratization of design process, you know, through parametric design. So I you know, I wanted to do a sort of atelier, like a kind of workshop for other people. That was my thinking, and I was reading books about entrepreneurs like Virgin, you know, Richard Branson, and I got really excited about the whole idea about business and raising funds, and so I made this business plan and so on. But I didn't know that I would end up having an architect office, because at the time I was more excited out of technology and creating a new way of doing an office, not another architecture office, but I was excited about a new kind of company for a new kind of thing that is not done at the moment. Because I didn't see myself as being an architect that had enough skills or whatever to beat even, you know, the other architects. In fact, I thought I was not a very good architect at all. I was just excited at the level of new technology and Grasshopper and all these new things that were happening. And I just thought that a lot of the offices that exist, they don't fully understand it because they didn't grow up with it. I studied at the AA, you know, same year as people like Neri Oxman and all that. And I remember the excitement, the general excitement in the class when we saw all these things. It was crazy. It's like a new world, honestly. And so I couldn't just do normal architecture. I just couldn't. And so that's, you know, I started with the teaching and then slowly set up my thing, and then it became what it became.
So you started because you didn't find what you wanted to in the other offices, because let's say they were more conservative than you would have liked them to be.
You know, I don't think it's their fault. You know, I worked at Zaha Hadid, and I don't think when you set up an office, you set it up with a DNA, right? With a kind of original thought of what is going to be the main driver of it. For me, like the very first thing I did was assemble a 3D printer and learn how to send code to it. And that's why we did the Silkworm
Okay.
plugin. And that was my excitement at the beginning, was around that. And
Okay.
how can someone who's never even touched Grasshopper or anything 3D printing or whatever, how can they understand that ambition? Like, they can't, because it's like if you talk to them Chinese, right? It's like a different language altogether, which I knew because I was teaching it every Saturday, but it wasn't fair on me to impose it on them. Like, and I did say, like, do you want me to set up a shop here? Do you want me to kind of, and you know, how could they know? Like, how could they say yes? You know, and
But
that's why I think at some point we just need to create what's not existing, and that's creating a company, I think.
But how do you see the practice now? Like, let's say 10 years later, do you see that slowly creeping into other offices and eventually it will take over? Or do you see something that will remain on the side, like we are, just as a side service from time to time for specific projects?
I hear, you know, like they say it's just a tool, right? I mean, of course, you know, I started by doing freelancing and helping other practices, and then slowly that kind of approach created a kind of style, or created a kind of and now, you know, people are like, look at the parametric project. Like, even my mom, or, you know, like, that's a parametric project. Like, they understand that a project has a certain kind of vibe, and that's a parametric, you know, thing. And so they understand when there's a little gradient, or when there is some kind of natural shape, that it's the parametric. Just like we would say, you know, in Vienna, the sort of style of Gustav Klimt and all this, you know, the secession. Like, I think that parametric is equally important as the secession movement. Like, I think that it's created offices like Mark Forn's, the very many, Mary Oxman, you know, what they're doing in the ICD, but all these different kind of practices that have embraced it as their DNA. And I don't think that an office that has started without that DNA can catch up. Simply because it's ingrained into, when people hire me, they hire this approach. And when I talk about it, it's integral to what I say. And so I you know what I mean? It's hard to practice if you don't know the tool itself, and it's hard to develop such a deep style if it's not integral to what you do, you know?
But you are mostly hired for design, right? For the very, like, not to develop parametrically someone else's idea, right? You're mostly hired to design it yourself.
It depends. I mean, like, you know, there's still a lot of offices that hire us to help them, and we do this, and I quite like it because I learn about other people's, like, you know, I give Grasshopper classes to Foster+Partners. I still give a lot of and consultancies and stuff like that. You know, I work with Simply Rhino to do a lot of their classes, the Grasshopper class and consultancy. So I still do a lot of that, but really I do it because I enjoy it, like, and because I love to learn, and I love to teach. I love it. Like, I love having other people in the class and sharing thoughts and getting their thoughts, and I find this so empowering for everyone to get to collaborate. But yeah, I mean, most of the stuff we're doing, the big income is like commissioned designs and fabrication, because we have the design studio and we have a fabrication space. So the best case scenario is the full package, design and fabrication.
Yeah, I agree. I just see you mentioned Mary Oxman, you mentioned ICD, you mentioned the very many and stuff. A lot of sculptural stuff there, you know, like a lot of things that architects don't even consider. It's very marginal. It's very, very, very small percentage of the stuff. So since I started, I always looked for the ways to push this into the standard architecture, you know, push this into the 99.999% of other architecture. And that's why I always tried to work on these projects like these airports and stuff like that, more commercial projects, although that doesn't fit so much to my personality. I maybe more similar to you when you talk about the Burning Man and these types of projects. But anyway, I tried to push it, and that's why I'm developing now a bit in this CATIA direction, and so try to develop these digital twins, because I think it's important to find a way to push these parametrics into the normal architecture, because what is parametric? It's nothing else than automation, and automation is coming to every single field. And in our field, in field of architecture and the building industry, I feel that automation is way, way, way behind when we compare it to the mechanical engineering industry, to the electrical engineering, and so on and so on. So I see parametrics a bit less artistically than you do. I mean, I admire that side of it too, but I'm trying to develop also this automation side, this dry engineering side of it, because I think there is also a lot of potential. And I always try to tell people that this way of building, of fixing everything and then not being able to go back and change something because you're already 9 months into the projects and there is no room to change anything because everything will have to be redone. I always try to push this idea of 100% parametrical model where you can change anything at any point and everything else will be updated so that you have much more freedom in designing, because people are still very, very scared of these free forms of architecture that has all unique elements and so on, where they shouldn't be. I mean, where in theory, with CNC machines, the effort should be the same. It's only about the assembly later on. And generally, the world is going to the direction of assembly, which I firmly believe in, prefabricated, modular, so not build on site. That's so deprecated, so old. I mean, it's dangerous, it's polluting, and so on. We should all build and assemble on site, like all other industries are doing. And it's extremely slow. Are you ever getting frustrating about how slow this development is, or does it not bother you that much?
No, it's funny, this architecture versus what you call normal architecture or not normal. It's a funny kind of separation because I mean, like you say, 99.9% of our buildings are kind of permanent office buildings or stuff like that. But at the same time, architects are not the normal thing for construction. I think most of the construction happens without even architects, and is driven by profit and by real estate agents, estate developer, and so even within that 99.9%. Is, I think, 20% being architected, right? So that says how kind of behind we are when we deal with. But I'll tell you, I think actually the fact that we're on the fringe maybe also makes us reverse the equation, because when we did Galaxia, we connected with the general public, and a lot of people were really surprised and amazed by Galaxia, in a sense, the general public, because they couldn't understand how we didn't use any main structure, why everything was structure. There wasn't any hierarchy in our structures. All of it was structure. And they couldn't understand. Usually they build a box and then they decorate the box, and then that's how they do crazy festival things, And so it raised a lot of questions, and I talked to lots and lots of people, and I think what matters is for us to talk to the general public and to get the general public excited about what we do. And the very many, when it fringes towards art, I think it opens up a sort of an emotional aspect, like you said, the more artistic aspect that actually connects us more to the general public. And really, it's them that drives. It's their imagination. It's them that say, I want to buy something if it's by an architect that I like, or if it's a style that I recognize, and so if we can talk to the general public like what Bjarke Ingels does really well, then I think we not only increase our fringe of, like you say, of parametric design, but we also generally empower architects to connect more with the industry and therefore enable our thoughts of what a better architecture, like you say. I mean, I fully believe in modular architecture. I believe that actually with timber and mass timber, this is coming back. We have to prefabricate the timber and assemble it on site. We patented a robot called the Polybot for doing on-site assembly with Arab, and so I'm with you on that fully. But talking to the general public, I think, is extremely important.
You mentioned printing with dirt. I saw some projects you worked on. That's printing with sand, right? Is that what you were referring to? I saw that you were posting something.
No, so we did a project with Chris Precht of Panda, I mean ex-Panda now Studio Precht, and we 3D printed using sand and furan binder in Saudi Arabia. So we were commissioned a project there for some kind of sort of urban furniture, and we just wanted to do it with local materials. And so we found a foundry that was using sand for creating metal casts. And so we did this sort of intra-lattice octo-truss, and then let Caramba generate the thicknesses, and then 3D print that with the sand printers. And it was really interesting. Like, people were so confused by this. And the general public was super excited again, you know?
Yeah, because I saw some pictures and it looked amazing. I didn't know. So you worked with Chris Precht. I saw you posted a video with him. So you know him personally.
Yeah. We're so aligned. Like, you know, it's funny, but when you start doing practice and people see you, it's like magnets. Like, when you're aligned with a way of thinking, you just, and then when opportunity comes, you're like, it's natural to work with the people that you're aligned with. And so we just, you know, he called me, and then we just like, let's do it. And it was great because, you know, I think he's so good at conceptualizing ideas, and he has such a good way of connecting with you know, the general public. Like, he has 200,000 followers on Instagram. He's an extremely humble, amazing storyteller. And, you know, and I did the sort of more parametric and fabrication stuff. So we were very complementary, and I really enjoyed this collaboration. I love collaborations in general.
I noticed also that he had very interesting projects that go to modular, to prefabricated, parametric, and I also very firmly believe that the mass timber is coming back, and that more and more projects should be mass timber and prefabricated as well. And I'm trying to orient myself toward that. And this kind of goes with the Sol Systems and CATIA, because they are orienting themselves toward that, and it's mostly used in the mass timber prefabricated projects now, mostly in Canada, but still around the world. So that's what I'm pursuing right now, and I mean, you will see hopefully some results soon. But you also did something with them, right?
With Dassault
system?
Yeah. We're working on a project for Milan 2021 now, because it was meant to be this Milan, but it's Milan Design Week. And we're working with their tools. So Katia has now a parametric engine called
XGen.
And it also has a life cycle analysis tool, which I think is fascinating. So we've done a lot of work on simulations, on life cycle of plastic and bioplastics. Really going a little bit deeper into the cost. You know, we did a project with Cost, the fashion brand, last year, called Conifera, just after Galaxia. And then, but it was criticized by people that thought that bioplastic was worse than plastic. And I did a lot of studies into that, and they're wrong. Like, bioplastic is way better. It's less toxic. It's better for your lungs. It's compostable. The composting facilities are here. We just need to learn about it. So it's, you know, all these projects, like I was mentioning with Galaxia, they're all educational projects. They're all here to explain things. I don't really, I mean, obviously I love beauty and I love to do stuff that are beautiful, but to me, a project only matters if it helps the planet. Like, if it helps understand concepts that will help people and humans, and
if it has multiple layers of value, so to speak, not only.
Yeah, exactly. So this will be a continuation of that project.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, I mean, very deep into the subject now. I mean, exploring the software for its sake, and XGen itself and all others are very, very interesting, because you see, for 10 years I program everything as a plugin for Rhino, you know, in C# and C++. And then I realized that, for example, the CATIA, which is unknown to us architects mostly, has this parametrics inbuilt into it. It's something that we know, like in Rhino, as history or something like that. So it's a very interesting concept that when you realize that you just simply model whatever you're modeling, and then at one point you realize that everything you did is saved in kind of a tree structure. So you can always go back and change anything. And so this concept itself very intrigued me, because I again, that fits to my personality. Like I'm excited by this puzzle solving and by this parametrics. Like how can I make something that's completely interconnected? This is what occupies me. This 100% parametrics. So that's why I'm experimenting with now. And as I said, hopefully soon I will show some videos and some examples of this pursuit. But what I wanted to ask you on the business side, let's say. Like we live in the age of globalization, so we see how everything becomes bigger. So there were, I don't know, 50 car companies. Now basically there's 3 car companies. So I sense that in architecture, we also see the rise of these mammoths, right? Of these Goliaths, like Zaha did, like Foster+Partners, and so on and so on. And from the business point of view, do you think that we will be drowned? Do you think that for whatever services they would need us for, they would just create a team of 10 people inside their office and say, thank you, we don't need you, we have this team? And that we always have to be smarter than those 10 people in order to stay above the water? Do you see it like that? Or do you see it as there will always be room for small offices in some way? I don't know.
I mean, it's a funny one because, I give the Grasshopper classes there and those, and so I'm actively giving my thoughts and skills to them. And I really I have a funny perception of that. I think it's growth, like it's not always in size. Like I think that to have an office that's at the very forefront of architecture, you don't need a huge mega office. I think actually when you have a mammoth, it's really hard to innovate, and you end up with a highly specialized world in which you have the Grasshopper guys, the rendering guys, the graphic design team, and therefore you lose this holistic approach, which I love. In Buckminster Fuller wrote a book, The Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth.
Of course, I quote it last time in my video when I talk about this comprehensiveness, that people should be more interested in different fields and not specialized. Yeah,
I mean, for sure. I think he calls them the pirates, I think, the people on the boats, because they had to know everything, because when you're on a boat, you have no choice. And we think of Leonardo da Vinci or people that had a overview of an endless curiosity and had the means to adapt very quickly and learn everything and switch to medicine and in that sense, not be bounded by specialization or big corporate structures or systems that prevent you from having a holistic approach. I think when you say, I want everything parametric, I think that's a healthy obsession, because you'll have no choice but to keep it like fully overall thinking. You can't divide it.
The question is how to do that, because people will easily argue, let's say Leonardo da Vinci or Isaac Newton, they could be Renaissance people because the science wasn't developed then so much. They could know biology and physics and mathematics because the field itself was small. And someone could say today, if you take biology, it has 1,000 branches and each of those branches is extremely deep, so you have to specialize. But my point in that, at least when it comes to architecture or building industry, is that the way to not specializing it is automation. So all those things that you think you need to specialize, you automate, let the machine does that, and then that lets you as a human rise again and again be a Renaissance person, again can overview everything, because you don't have to go so deep. You let the machine do all those specialized branches. Now, for example, let's take whatever. Let's say that the facade element, the connection of facade elements. 300 years ago, there was probably 3 types of connection. Now there is 3,000 types. So you can say, I need a person that will learn 10 years how to do these 3,000 different facade connections, because you have to know them. And you can argue, no, I can make an AI algorithm that can choose one perfect out of these 3,000 for you. And this human doesn't have to specialize in this stupid thing anymore, but they can rise to the design phase. So for me, I think that automation or parametrics is the answer to going back to this Buckminster Fuller's ideas of not being specialized, by kind of having an overview, by automating this little task,
Yeah, I also, that you're right. And I also think that the fact that you have a system rather than a finished form, like the fact that it's less about the sketch and more about a dynamic system that can have variations to it, also forces you to think from the bottom up. Like it forces you to let go of a preconceived idea of a form, and so therefore you don't have this grand architect that has a vision, and then the sort of all the rest is like beyond concept, and it's just like a little team taking care of it. It's actually the parametric model is here to show you variation. So it comes from the model, it comes from the material, from the machines you use, and therefore it becomes way less about the one mind and way more about the systems that you set up and the teams and so in that sense, yeah, I guess one is forced to think holistically and cannot keep it all in his brain.
Yeah. But how do you see generally like parametrics? I mean, I'm talking a little bit about the present and the past again, not about the future. But in my 10 years of practice, I barely did anything for architects or with architects. That's maybe surprising to hear, but all the automation I did came after the design was developed. And when someone said, okay, now we have this complex geometry, now we have to actually produce shop drawings, now we have to have the lists of elements, part lists, and I don't know what. Now can we please automate it? And when we talk about parametric design generally in our practice, people imagine actually designing with parameters. So from my experience, that happens very, very little. But I think you are one of the rare ones where that actually happens. So what is your thought on that? Does that actually happen more often than I think, or no?
Well, you remember when I mentioned that you can't have a practice that just does parametric design. You got to be a practice that has this as its DNA, because I don't think that the older generation of architects will understand deeply what Buckminster Fuller was saying, which is, we need to think in terms of systems. And I don't think when you're trained with the likes of Frank Lloyd Wright, and who used to be a guy who would have a vision in the brain and literally draw it, and then I don't think that's applicable to working with a parametric system. I think, when you go outside and you look at a natural system, you know that it's the sum of many rules, you know that it's the sum of parameters, and you know that one plant will have similarity to another one, and you know that there is a certain DNA similarity, and we know the theory of evolution, and we know evolutionary solving and stuff like this that connects us deeply to the natural systems. And also why the style ends up looking natural, by the way.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that other offices will have this as a design process to generate lots of options or parametric variations, create matrices and then understand the fitness criteria of matrices. I mean, right now I'm talking to you because it's you, right?
Yeah,
like if I were talking to the general public, fitness criteria for your matrix, like they'll be like, you know what I mean? It's just we know between our community that it's just a different way of thinking, of creating, and I just I try my best to explain it, and that's why I try not to stay too much within the whole smart geometry, all the schools that do the advanced stuff. I'd rather connect and explain it to general public, but I do think that we should come out of our bubbles and understand that it has a real advantage over conventional thinking, and that people will be really pleased to hear that we can design buildings like nature designs. I think so.
Yeah, it's just going to take some time. Apparently, it's not going as fast as we would like, right?
Yes.
I mean, you mentioned Buckminster Fuller a lot. I mean, of course, we're all fans of him, especially in our field. And I slightly wonder about the bigger picture, like, for example, him and this Jacques Fresco from this Venus project and so on. Those are the people that have this attitude that I always had, that the technology will free us all. So as the technology develops, we will get free to do creative stuff. And then somehow on the opposite side, you have people that are neo-Luddites that think that technology will destroy us, and like Ted Kaczynski, like the Unabomber, that tried to stop the development of technology because it said eventually it will kill us. And I somehow when I observe this path, I think it can be either 0 and 1. So either we're going to go into the complete utopia or a complete dystopia. And sometimes when I see how the things are developing, especially when you have these tests like this virus, and when you see that the mentality of people, I fear that the dystopia with the development of technology is much, much more likely than utopia. What's your general thought on that?
I'm on the side of of an optimistic future. Like, I'm on the side that technology has enabled so much progress and has saved lives. Technology has connected us, has made this confinement actually surprisingly enjoyable, at least for me.
Yeah.
We can talk online together. I've been connecting with people. Yesterday I was in the VR world, like visiting my site, like virtually in person. Like I see technology as a way to generate new kinds of spaces for the human intelligence to thrive and flourish. And I think, Ted Kaczynski, he was obviously mentally ill, and he obviously, I don't even want to consider his thinking because he killed people,
yeah.
which to me is the ultimate darkness.
Yeah.
But when it comes to Bucky Fuller, or what he's created, the body of work of Ryoto, the idea that technology empowers people and actually allows people to have more control over their direct environment. I think that we've lost technology as it came first. Obviously, there's always questions of power, and obviously a lot of the factories were shocking at first when they were here in England, and you had like all the Charles Dickens and all these scary things, and then they went to China because we didn't want to have them next to us, and then now I've got my Fab Lab down the road, and I can generate masks to save lives for the NHS, and it's so beautiful that technology, especially the democratization of technology, and the fact that it's so. If we're willing to look into it, if we have that curiosity, or if you have good teachers, or to understand that technology is not that hard, and that we all have the power to learn the mathematics and the basic principles of technology, that everyone has the mental capacity to do it. And trust me, I wasn't really good at math, but it's just the sheer enthusiasm, or the sheer aspect of having a good teacher. And Buckminster Fuller was a great teacher. Ryoto was a great teacher. And so beyond being good architects, we also need to be good teacher, and we need to kind of explain to people how simple things are and how exciting they are. And that positivity will, I think, help save lives. Like really, the opposite of Ted Kaczynski, who was killed for his fear of technology. Yeah.
I agree mostly with you. But do you know who Nick Bostrom is? Nick Bostrom from the Oxford University. It's a philosopher.
No?
He has this simulation hypothesis, if we are living in a simulation. You know about that, maybe?
Yeah, I heard Elon Musk saying that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Elon Musk was basically quoting the Nick Bostrom. So he read Nick Bostrom's book. I have it here somewhere. It's called Superintelligence. Okay. And basically, he's a very smart philosopher. He said that there is only three options, basically. Either we self-destroy ourselves, like either every civilization destroys itself, or the second possibility, they lose interest in making simulations, and the third possibility, we live in a simulation. Because down the road, 100 years, 1,000 years, 2,000 years from now, we will be able to create a technology, like VR technology or whatever, that makes simulations indistinguishable from reality. So you either destroy yourself, or you lose interest, or we are living in a simulation. So that's the probability theory, and that's why Elon Musk said it. But why I wanted to bring this up here is because I generally agree with you with technology very, very much. But this philosopher Nick Bostrom has also another theory that's called the vulnerable world, or something like that. And he basically says, imagine our whole history of humanity, and imagine we have like a bag of spheres, and inside there's white spheres and black spheres. So he says, imagine whenever you pull out an invention, it has a color. So you invent the wheel. I don't know, it's a white wheel. It's a good thing. You invent this, and says from time to time, you pull out gray spheres, which is like nuclear power. So you have nuclear bombs that can destroy the world and so on and so on. And he said, so far with the development of technology, we have been lucky not to pull out a black ball. And what could be a black ball? He said, imagine if we invent a way to make a nuclear bomb that anyone can make in the kitchen. Let's imagine an invention that's like a nuclear bomb, but you can go now in your kitchen and make it. He said, for example, that would be a black ball. And he says, if in this development of technology, we do pull that out, then we're kind of doomed. Then we either track everything, every single person we track their minds to see what they're about to do. We enter this dystopian world, or we get annihilated because one crazy person makes it in the kitchen and destroys the world, So it's not a question. It's just something to think about because I'm generally on your side, very, very much an optimistic side. But when I read this theory of the vulnerable world, I was thinking, what if with the development of technology, we come to the stage where we design these black balls that could end everything very easily,
I mean, we already have it. Like, if you see the amount of countries that have access to the nuclear bomb, and you see the kind of level of corruption equally to the level of access to a nuclear bomb, and one could say, well, it would have easily just launched, right? Mm-hmm. Like, just take North Korea, or I think it's not inside people's nature to self-destruct to that level. I think that the way that you described that, he said we must be in a simulation because otherwise we'd be destroying ourselves pretty much. I see it a little bit like the Truman Show complex, or the idea that the world, there are higher forces that are controlling things, and that for sure we are under the spell of some, whatever conspiracy theory we have. I see it as infancy. I see it as not wanting to become an adult, not realizing that we have the power over our own world, that we have the possibility of changing things ourselves, that we are fully in control of our destiny. I see it as adulthood, right? Because that's when you leave your parents. It was a struggle for me, I had to do a psychoanalysis, and Freud describes this really well. I really think that conspiracy theory are a way to avoid adulthood. I mean, sorry, it might be controversial, but I think it's a little deeper than just because I can't imagine. I mean, and I know that science can be counterintuitive, so saying I can't imagine that this would happen is enough. But I just see the progress, the technological progress around us, and even though it's really amazing. I mean, anyone who's actually put on VR goggles knows that we are so far off reality. Like, I was yesterday even asking about why is the model triangular, and he's like, well, because I cannot even do a rectangle because it's too many polygons.
Yeah, but so far off is the question, because it doesn't matter if it's 100 years, 1,000 or 1 million from now. If we come to that point, and we theoretically should, to be able to develop such technology, and there is no reason that says no, because it's a linear progression. But yeah, okay, I will leave that aside because we can do another hour on just
yeah, I mean, you know the Fermi paradox, right?
That of course.
So if there was this possibility of going that far in technology, which I think actually will hit a lot of walls, it's amazing and it's exciting, but I think it's overestimating the humanity's ability to create technological advances, to think that we could do a simulation.
Well,
I mean, it's great. Maybe those people are actually way too optimistic.
Well, humans might be evolving into an AI very soon. So maybe AI will develop it. So we don't know.
Yeah, but you see, the AIs are so basic. Like,
but in 50 years,
so basic.
50 years from now, 100 years from now, it's hard to imagine. In the 60s, no one could imagine what internet is. It's very, very hard to make predictions. Very, 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 very hard. So let me ask you one extremely dry question, and then we can close up with some fun subjects.
Yeah.
So the dry question is BIM. So what do you think about BIM generally, about this, like everybody switching to Revit and ArchiCAD and trying to have these comprehensive models? Do you have any? Does that create any problems with you in your practice, or is it a challenge? Or
I mean, in all honesty, I never had to go so far in a project that I had to tinker with a fully BIM model.
Yeah.
Because I think when you do parametric design, you're, like you say, because everything is in Grasshopper, it's very easy to export IFCs and stuff, and other BIM experts deal with the rest of it, which is not what I wish we could do. I wish, Rhino Inside. I don't know if you know about Rhino Inside, but it allows you to do Grasshopper within BIM and stuff, so within Revit. So I have high hopes for that. We're doing research into it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's never hindered the workflow. I mean, what hinders the workflow is people sending you baked drawings like BWGs from a BIM model, and it's such a mess. And actually, because it's automated, people are less careful, and therefore sends you really messy files.
Yeah.
And you're lost in a world of what does it even mean, this file? That's where it hinders us.
Do you hope, like me, that the world without 2D drawings will come soon, when everything will be 3D?
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't want to say I got fired from the Barclays for that, but they were like, "Where are your plans and sections?" And I kept on saying, like,
"Why did you need them?"
Backward, it's like we're doing these really complex 3D systems, and they're asking about plans and sections, and I think it's just a generation thing. Surprising to hearing that at the Barclays, to be honest, but. I was just like, I couldn't deal with it. I was just like, why am I wasting my time teaching something that I don't believe in anymore?
You know Tobias Walliser, the Lava Architects from Stuttgart? Yeah. Well, I worked with him and I taught with him here at the university. And I remember, like, I don't know, 15 years ago at one conference, he was working for UN Studio when they built the Mercedes Museum in Stuttgart. And I don't know if you know the UN Studio Mercedes Museum in Stuttgart. It's very free form. And I remember his lecture 15 years ago, like he was saying, we couldn't do anything with 2D. Like where are you going to do the section? Where are you going to do like the plan? Because it's all, even the floors and then he's saying we have to get rid of that. And then I was thinking 15 years ago, I don't think anything has changed on that matter. It's so slow, but
it's sad, but I mean, the plans is a tool that is pretty useful to understand areas and stuff. At some point or another, you need plans or you need a clipping plane of some sort.
Yeah.
But the idea that, a plan and section are so crucial to architectural design is no longer applicable at all.
Yeah, I agree. Let me ask you, just what do you do aside from architecture? What are your personal interests? How do you have fun?
Well, my wife is not an architect, so that's good.
That's rare. That's rare. My wife is, so that's rare.
Okay, that's good. And so we love to travel. I love to walk around with her, and I read a lot. I love reading. We've been playing a lot of games and stuff like that. I really enjoyed that.
Cool. What would you recommend me? I mean, I was about to read the Spaceship Earth from Buckminster because I just took it on Kindle. And anything else you would recommend that you read recently?
That's a very good point. Give me 1 sec. This is really good. Mathematics and art.
You're blurring the... okay.
It is blurred.
No, because you have this automatic blurring of the background turned on Skype.
I see. Yeah, that's quite cool, actually. A Cultural History of Mathematics and Art by Lynn Gamwell. It's really amazing.
Okay.
Talking about Buckminster Fuller, he was part of a school which was called the Black Mountain College. And Ruth Azawa, John Cage, they were all part of that school that had holistic thinking. So there's several books. This one is called Black Mountain College Experiment in Art.
Yep.
And then I've been reading an ecology philosopher called Timothy Norton, I think, which is really interesting as well. That's happening on my list of things to read.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Thanks for the advice. I'll check them. I'll check them out. I usually go outside the architecture on when I go to books so that I get a bit of different perspectives on life. Yeah, and I usually read several books at the same time. Like right now, I'm reading the Joseph Campbell, The Power of Myth. He
Right, okay.
like the hero with 1,000 faces and stuff is the guy that talk about meat, which is very interesting. And then I'm connected to our story. I'm reading a book. How is it called? A Year Without Pants, I think. It's about guy working for the WordPress company. I don't know if you know, but the WordPress, you know, the websites.
Oh, of course, Matt Mullenberg.
Yeah. His company is called Automatica. He has 1,000 something employees, and no office. They don't have an office space, so it's all online. So basically, one of his workers wrote a book. It's called A Year Without Pants. How he basically only works online. And I wanted to see. He explains about the benefits because I'm a very big proponent of online work. You know. So I have like a couple of books.
You should have an interview with him like this. I think wow, he's so inspiring, and his company is so beautiful, and I love WordPress. You know, it's just I mean, they've managed to do the impossible, right? Take something very complex and make it exactly what we were talking about.
Yeah.
Making it accessible to people. Yeah.
Yeah, and I hope we can do the same, you know, like especially with prefabricated and modular, I can really think we can move everything into the online space and not be limited by the physical one. Yeah. So I will not hold you any longer.
Good questions. Thank you. I really appreciate it. It's very deep and meaningful questions.
Oh man, we didn't even start. Next time we go on Psychedelics and the Burning Man.
Oh my gosh, don't get me started on that.
I listen a lot of
interview on mushrooms.
I listened a lot of podcasts about LSD and DMT and mushrooms and about Terence McKenna and so on. Do you like the subject?
It's fascinating. No, it's incredible. Obviously, I couldn't escape it at Burning Man. But I was, I tried it for the first time very recently. LSD and mushrooms. It's pretty incredible. Like it's a very it's obviously impossible to explain, but the connection it creates in your brain is so unique that it sort of rewires things. And so for some, I can see that it's very, very scary. But it opens up new perspective on things. So it's been a really, really interesting.
Did you experience this loss of ego, so to speak, that people talk about?
Yeah, the dissolution of the ego is something that I find very important, and I think we talked about it indirectly. But by connecting to systems, you dissolve your kind of units, and you see everything being connected, and that's a big core of the kind of the systematic the systems thinking we were talking about. And like you see trees in ways that you don't see them usually. Like I remember looking at a tree and being like, "Whoa," you know what I mean? And then, like,
of course.
Actually, even without it, like, look at a tree and spend time looking at it. Like, that level of complexity, like, honestly, it's hard to fathom in a computer how you could reproduce that, because it's really, really intensely complex. And so being able to just look at trees in this way, I think even just that made it worth the ride. No, it's we put everything in this drugs category, and I really think there's a clear difference between obviously opiates and stuff and mushrooms, let alone LSD. LSD is a very violent, it's a very intense one, but the mushrooms, the truffles and stuff like that, like they're just they are put in the same categories, but I think there's something about it that makes it. I think that actually is going to make humans actually think more straight.
I think as well.
Maybe less straight, but maybe more multi-directional.
Well, there are theories that's what made the jump in the evolution. There are lots of theories from, I think Terence McKenna even, that in the evolution of human, actually, when they start using the mushrooms, that made the click of consciousness, that made the big jump in the evolution, which
it's
is not impossible.
Like the kind of I've had one, I wouldn't say too recently, but and the kind of interaction you have with people, the kind of connection you can establish with another human being, and the level at which you kind of understand things is so, like you say, so sideways, so different. It's a little bit like looking at a cubist painting. It's cubist paintings would kind of represent things from different angles. I feel like it sort of imposes a kind of cubism to reality. You know what I mean? And so you can only grow from it. And it's, I can see why the Beatles, like, when you listen to Sgt. Pepper compared to the, you can really see how they got this opening experience. Like, yeah.
Thanks a lot, and then let's do this also soon again. Stay safe.
Cheers, you too.
Talk to you soon. Bye bye.